All right, we are in Atlantic City for the Mid-Atlantic Hardscape Trade Show, or probably better known as MOTS. And I asked Joe Raboine with Belgard to sit down and talk with us for the podcast. And Joe's somebody that I've admired and respected for a long time in the industry, and former contractor. So for people that don't know who you are, can you tell a little bit about your background and maybe your title and what you do for Belgard now?
Yeah, no, thank you, Craig. And yeah, much respect for what you do as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
So I started out as a hardscape masonry contractor in 1992. So I can't believe it's already been 30 years. So it's been interesting seeing that evolution happen, right? With, I mean, back then it was a hard sell. I was in the Milwaukee, Chicago area. It was a hard sell just to even sell Holland stone against concrete back in the day. And, to see that evolution has been kind of crazy. So throughout the 90s and until 2007, we grew from one crew. I actually started with a couple $100 and bought some tools and just grew into, my brother and I grew it into a 7-crew installation company until 2007. But we didn't do any plants, we didn't do any maintenance. It was truly, outdoor living hardscape. We did some full masonry. We had a pool installation crew. And at the end of 2007, the timing, I guess, could have been, you could see it was good or bad, right? We liquidated all that and then started manufacturing modular elements, our modular fireplaces, kitchen components. And that was great until about 2008, and then the economy just completely collapsed. And not the best time to sell speed and efficiency to contractors who were looking for work. So the next few years, we kind of tried to stay afloat, I guess, a little bit, and expanded. And we were working with both Unilock and Belgard at the time. And in 2013, an opportunity came up with Oldcastle to just sell the company, and I sold the company, and I've been here ever since.
Right.
So it's been almost 10 years, which is crazy. But my current position, I've had many, I would say, in that 10-year period, is I'm the director of Residential Hardscapes. And people ask, like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
But because of my background, my focus really is on product development, on training, and on design. And so my background is, being the business owner, my passion even back then was really all about the design. And so, that mix of skills, I guess, suits me well for the position I'm in because, as we talked, this industry is, absolutely exploded and gotten very complex. And but I absolutely love it. I mean, we're working on a ton of things at Belgard, and I think the future for us collectively is the sky's the limit.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
well, that's a great story, and it's interesting that even back in the 90s and 2000s, you're focused on outdoor living, which was, I mean, you're way ahead of the curve in a way, because it seems like a lot of people were either they would do pavers and landscaping, and that's always what I've done is try to mix everything together, and we would do plants and all that. But so that's an interesting way to kind of approach the industry back then.
Yeah, and kind of how that came about is, so when we first started, we were actually doing like stone masonry. We were repairing old stone foundations, and my father was a carpenter, and I had lots of relatives in the trades. But we started doing, the first thing we did, we actually did an anchored diamond wall, and we did a patio way back in '92, and we realized, like, hey, there's something here. I mean, that industry at that time was still in its infancy, really.
Right.
And what happened is in our market, in that Milwaukee, Chicago area, there were a lot of people that started doing pavers. And by the late 90s, we realized, like, hey, we're all doing the same thing. I mean, there were only a handful of products, really.
Right.
We had tumbled pavers. We had a few geometric style, the old, Unidecor and some of that stuff, and Holland stone.
Right.
And we quickly realized that if we tweaked the design and made it more, added details like inlays, did some cooler overall designs, that we set ourselves apart. And by the late 90s, we started doing kitchens. I mean, really things you still see today, fireplaces, all of it. And that's when we realized, like, we could have grown to 15 crews. I mean, there was such a demand. And we felt like we had, like, struck this nerve, like, oh my God, people saw it. We did lots of, I think we did 4 home shows every year. Everything we did at the home show, we'd build, whatever that model was, we'd build like 30 of them, 40, 50. Like, people saw it, like, I love it, I want this exactly. But what we realized is the challenge was, it took 3 or 4 or 5 years to train a foreman proficiently, and this is still the case today, right? See, it's even worse today. But that's really what led to the idea of, can we make some of this modular? And so that's when we started making the kitchens and fireplaces.
Right.
And then that kind of snowballed, and we ended up patenting it, and then said, hey, if we can do this for ourselves, we can make these for other contractors. But the whole idea was really to speed up that process, because I mean, as you know, I mean, you could spend a month on a project easily on some of those, and and homeowners don't really appreciate that. I mean, that's like you're in their backyard, and so, one of the things for me now, looking at this incredible interest in what we do, is everything we do, and this has led to lots of changes within Oldcastle Belgard with the products, is if it's not easier for the contractor, then we need to go back to the drawing board, because there's no point in creating something that's so complex that it takes, there's no need for it really anymore with the technologies and tools we have. And so, I mean, we're in this like post-Amazon era, right? Like people want, like, I just want to swipe and then tell me it's going to drop in here this afternoon. Like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, and so it's no different with hardscape, right? I mean, when you're in the backyard of somebody's, it's very disruptive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are dogs, there's kids, there's mud. And so I think for a lot of us, and I would put myself in this, it's almost like we almost justify it by like, hey, there's 300 hours of labor. And whether you tell people, and if you break that on the bid or not, doesn't matter. But even to say, yeah, it's going to be $100,000, but I'm going to be here for a month. That's not necessarily a selling point. I know it's like a justification for the charge, but if you said it's going to be $100,000, and you know what, I'll be out of here in 3 days, right?
Yeah.
You could almost upcharge that. So,
yeah, and actually, we're on one of the biggest projects, like dollar-wise, that we've sold. And what's interesting is, and I've shared this in a few of my episodes already, but we're on Instagram. We try to be very active on Instagram, and through the stories and stuff, we show where we are in our projects and things like that. And our clients follow us, and we're almost unintentionally setting their expectation because they know that we're coming in 3 months, or they're like, but why does it take 3 months? And then they see our process, and they see that the yard's a mess, and I'll call and check in and say, hey, sorry, maybe we're running behind because of the weather, or we could easily get a month behind, just because of the size of projects we do. So, and they're like, oh yeah, we saw on Instagram, it looks great, it looks like that project is coming along really well, we can't wait for it, and that's it's been a good tool, I guess, for setting that expectation. And then our current customer doesn't follow us. They know us. I've known them for years, but they don't follow our daily stuff. They see our Facebook and that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because they thought we were going to be done in a month, and this is a pretty good sized project, and it's just not possible. Yeah. And we faced some challenges which pushed us back a little bit. So it is interesting that, like, and you guys are involved with HGTV, but like the DIY and HGTV channels, they kind of set an expectation over the years of, oh yeah, come on in, we'll have this done in a day or 3 days, and they have 60 people a production crew. They've done the permits ahead of time. Like it all looks like they showed up at Home Depot and it was done by the end of the day. But so there's challenges with in a way training the clients for the expectation of what they're about to receive. So interesting that you were talking about your fireplaces, because before we even met, I installed one in 2010, and it was exactly what you were explaining, where I went to a Belgard U, and at the time I wasn't even using a lot of Belgard. It was more of an introduction to Belgard when I went there. And there was somebody there was sharing about Harmony, elements for what fireplaces. And I had a job coming up, and I was like, this would be perfect, because the lady had it was like February, and we were going to start in March, and she had very strict deadline we're having a graduation, and it was like her son's graduation, and she was turning 40, and they're throwing a big party or something. And I was like, this would be great because we can literally set this thing in a day. So, and it's a little more complicated than that, but we did our footing for it as we're doing our base for our patio, and then as that set up, we were able to set the fireplace, and it literally took less than an hour and I had never done one before. So it's a really great concept, and it's still something that's very big with the Belgard elements today. So
Sure.
that's
No, I
really
appreciate
cool.
it. I know that project too. We took a photo of it. It was on,
Yes.
I think it might have been on the cover of one of the catalogs. It's
Oh,
amazing.
it got a lot of traction over the over the years.
It's funny. I had a quick story about that. So the first one that we ever installed before we were selling to anybody, we were making, experimenting, and there was an individual who was having his daughter's rehearsal dinner out on this patio, and we were behind. I mean, it's it's easy to get behind with a lot of projects and weather and all that. And he was really upset with me because he was having it on this Saturday night, and I kept telling him, no, we got it, it'll be done. Well, it was on Friday morning. It was the last thing we had to do, and I come in there in the morning, and I didn't tell him we pre-built. I'm like, it'll be done, guys. I really wanted his reaction, and he came out and he started just screaming at me, yelling. I'm like, trust me, it'll be done. So he leaves, and literally our truck pulls up with all the elements. There's a full fireplace and a grill island.
Wow.
And we set them all within like 2 hours. So he left at like probably 9. By 11 o'clock, we had that done. We graded everything, seeded it, strawed it. We put some sod in around where they're having the party. But he came home at like noon. The guy I think he owned like a Saturn dealership or something. So he was pretty wealthy. Comes home, and I saw him. We were cleaning up, so he comes out thinking that we didn't finish, and we were already cleaned up.
He's coming in hot.
Our guy, and he starts to yell. I'm like, hold on a second. I said, let's just go walk in the backyard. He was absolutely blown away.
Yeah,
he could not.
that's cool.
And then I had to tell him, like, well, these are all pre-built. So I got this amazing testimonial from him. But he's like, it wasn't fair to you to kind of string me along. Yeah, that's true. But I just wanted your reaction. But
yeah, that's
anyway.
true. Yes. So those elements are that they've really taken legs in a way. There you have gas fire pits, you have fire tables, see-through options.
We've got all kinds of, for sure.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about how you're styling those maybe a little bit, and how you guys are like continuing to move the ball forward with that.
Yeah, so I look at, like that was, again, that was, I guess, 15 years ago, but, we've done a lot since I really, I guess, took over product probably about 4 years ago. The first thing that I suggested was to make our pavers modular, to make them all consistent. And when I first proposed that, everyone thought in the company was like, "Are you insane? You want us to scrap all our molds and get all new molds?" And I'm like, "Yes, but hear me out. Here's why."
Yeah, you sound like a contractor.
Yeah, exactly. Like here's the logic, and the logic for me was like, it took us many years sometimes to launch a product. And there was lots of debates about the size of the product, the shape of the product. But I said, what if we just standardize this to some degree? We can speed up that R&D process and new product launch process and focus more on. If we roadmap out the sizes, we can focus more on color and texture, which is really where people's interests are.
Yeah.
And so we did that. We're almost done. We've got a few locations that we're still transitioning, but for the most part, we've transitioned over. Our 2 core products are Origins and Dimensions. Origins is slate texture, and Dimensions is smooth. But we're already adding new textures like basalt. We have a whole artisan collection coming out that is more like hand-tooled kind of effects.
Right.
But the beauty of it for our contractors is there's this consistency, right? So you've got, right now everything's on a 3x3 inch increment. It's kind of like a Legos mindset, right?
Right.
So you can order multiple 3-piece range sizes. There's a small, medium, and large essentially, and they're all the same pattern. So if you get used to laying a certain pattern, A, B, or C, it's the same pattern. It's just larger or smaller. But then the single sizes you can modulate for borders, for inlays and accents, and everything is 60 mil. It's all 3x3. So when you're laying things out, especially modular designs, I mean, you could lay out a whole project and not have to cut almost anything. So, and it's more efficient for the dealers as well because there's consistency. Like, hey, I'm going to order this pallet. It's 120 square feet. So is this pallet, and so on and so on. But so it's given us like a roadmap to develop and launch product. But if you think about it, our product mix actually might shrink a little bit, but because there's greater differentiation in terms of color and texture, the palette actually, the combinations are almost exponential versus what we had a few years ago.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing, we're following the similar idea and mindset through the vertical, right? So Artforms, our modular panel system, also 3-inch increments. So in theory, and we've already seen this, you could lay out a linear fire pit in a kitchen, again, and go right around it with the pavers, no cuts.
That's awesome.
I mean, that saves tons of time.
Yes, so. And we So we install porcelain and we install Belgard. Currently, installing a different manufacturer, but we had a color selection. That was it came down to color, and sometimes that is it just and it was what the client chose, and we still we use some other things if we have to, but like we've noticed using we use dimensions and origins both. Sometimes we mix them, that kind of thing. So, but we did a project for my aunt that was kind of something we squeezed into the year, and it was very large. It's kind of a large project, so squeezing it in was challenging. But we had just come from cutting porcelain around a freeform pool and circles and done all this stuff, and then we come here and we're finishing the patio, and we're just like, we have 2 saws out, and we're like,
didn't even use them.
Right. So we got to, and what's interesting is we did the Origins 12, so it's manageable.
Yep.
And for that we have a smaller vacuum that goes off our air compressor.
Yep.
So it's like a handle, like a T handle type, and you can just stand there and move. So, so we were laying that way, and then when I started, we went all across the back of their house. So it gave me a little bit of leeway to be like, okay, we don't have to hit the end, So we started full pavers and in a double border, and then we worked our way through. And then we started at the base and moved up towards the house, or at the far end and moved to the house. So we started full there and went all the way across, and we're like, okay, this looks good, or let's go another 12. And that's as easy as it is to say, like, let's move another 3 inches, or let's move 6 inches or 12, So we basically didn't cut anything except for around the house.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we like to use our IQ saws and cut dust free. And with that size, it's manageable, so we'll score it with our demo saw.
Yeah.
So we get a nice consistent cut, and then we just take that and run it through our dustless saw.
Yeah.
And so that if, like you're saying, it's pretty much 6 inches. It's maybe.
The dimension's right to the center of the joint.
Right.
So if you're laying something out on whatever 3-inch or 1 foot increments, it's going to be exactly that.
Yeah. It can be as easy as designing that way, or it can be as easy as just laying your job site out as part of the design and making sure that you hit those numbers. But
yeah,
I'll attest to that we like doing slabs because we can use our excavator and vacuum.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, we have to cut those slabs in half to get to fill in the ends.
Yeah.
And then cut the end. So we actually spent more time cutting a 1-piece system than we did cutting the 3-piece. So I over the last 3 or 4 jobs using different products and using the modular system with Belgard, it is amazing how much time it saves, and the mess and the the leftovers and what you're hauling off. So
yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that. And that kind of translates. So, the broad vision that I have and that we're starting to implement is like through Belgard Design Studio and rooms, and there's the whole digitization of the assets, right? So thinking about how this whole process works from start to finish, how do you present samples? How do you show the designs? And for, we have, what are we at? 15, 16 operating companies that are throughout North America.
Yeah.
And for the most part, their product mixes are different, but we're starting to standardize those more. And really the driver of that is this digitization through design. So we're making a lot of progress nationally of standardizing things like art forms, origins, dimensions, and ultimately there probably will be essentially like a national color mix. And then there'll always be regional anomalies, but again, we need this kind of consistency in order for us to execute on, those assets through design. So, and whether, Design Studio is used, or if someone's using something like Vistera or, Pool Studios, we need to provide those assets to you guys, to make sure that you're able to convey to the consumer what they're going to receive. So,
and when you have a national show like Hardscape North America, or a show like this where you're showing your stuff and a newer acquisitions products, and then you have a catalog online and somebody hits the wrong region, and
it's a challenge.
And then they call us and like, hey, we want this paver in this color, this wall, and we are noticing that's a lot better than it used to be, because when I started using Belgard, it was you could get this from Chicago and you could get this from Kansas City. And it's
Oh,
still
yeah.
that way, but it seems like the
started to
colors are
become-
being more consistent.
You're,
so,
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, Art Forms is a great example. Like Scandina Gray is the same color
Right.
across North America. That's really probably the first product we've ever done that on.
Yeah.
But again, for that reason, I mean, through social media and Pinterest, all that
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, you can't really hide that there's something available in California versus Florida, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's going to find it as soon as like, I want this. And I mean, the good news is we can get it to them, but it just it's expensive and complicated. So,
Yes. Can you talk about Design Studio? Because I kind of forget about that sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's a great, and the funny thing is before you talk about it, I had probably Mike Miles back in the day in 2010. I sent a sketch in.
yeah.
And that was when you were first kind of launching the SketchUp or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we used that on that project, and then I've had other renderings done recently, and wow, what a difference.
It's evolved immensely. Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. So Design Studio, we started in 2009, right after we started selling elements. And the reason is we went out and presented all over the country, and people and contractors were like, this is fantastic, but I can't sell this. It's just, especially if you're trying to make that jump from a patio to a full outdoor space. So we started to do designs for them, and we used to charge for them. This is before we were acquired. So they'd submit a project, we would do the design, send it back. And so when we were acquired in 2013, it was decided like, hey, this is such an effective tool.
Right.
We were 70, 80% closure rates, and still, I think, similar to that to this day.
Yeah.
That why don't we just make this free for authorized contractors? And so we've expanded the team. We have 5 designers. It's not a huge team, but it's one of the benefits of being an authorized contractor. And all you really need to do is send in we literally have had almost napkin style sketches sent in.
Probably from me.
Yeah, maybe. and I tell it kind of like, hey, it's totally fine. All we need to know, we need photos, we need some rough dimensions, we need the address, and you can do it with a quick sketch. That's fine.
Yeah.
Or some people send in full CAD designs, and we convert them. But a couple of years ago, here's what the issue was, or I guess is, it normally takes 3 to 5 business days to flip those. And it's probably 2 or 3 hours of design work, depending on average. So a couple of years ago, we decided, why don't we start to like template some of these, at least, things like fire pits, kitchens that are fairly common. I mean, I was guilty of this. I shouldn't say guilty, but it's just kind of the default, right?
Right.
You get used to doing things a certain way. So a fire pit area with a seat wall, you might do that same design over and over as part of a patio.
Yeah.
So the idea was, let's just standardize that, and then that's how Belgard rooms came about. So we've got about 150 rooms on there, and about 50 of those are augmented reality as well.
Wow.
So the idea is, let's just, our goal isn't to take away design. It's really to have a starting point, and we can switch materials and all that. It's not a problem, but it's much more efficient, right? If we don't have to design these from scratch every time, we can flip a really beautiful design in like an hour or even less. And so, or if you're a contractor and you want to use the augmented reality feature, you can do that on the first consultation. Just walk out in their backyard, hit the button, and boom, it's there right on your iPad. And the power is amazingly powerful.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to invest in that. I mean, I hope in the next few years, there'll be hundreds of those to start, to choose from in our library, and just speeds that process.
And I've used it, and we did a pool last year, and I submitted, it was literally graph paper maybe, and I just put the dimensions, took pictures, and I sent it in, came back, and they were like, wow, this looks great. And then I think the real testimony is when you complete the project and it looks like the design, and we try to hit as much as possible. We really try to nail our design because that's what they're expecting, and things always change. But to this day he shows people, like people come over, he's like, this is what they showed us and this is what it is. We still talk to him, and he's a great client. So it is a powerful tool, and it does help sell and get people to visualize. And some people can visualize with 2D, but if you can really put them in the place, let them see, what's happening, it makes a huge difference for those who can't visualize.
Yeah, I read years ago, I think, and I could be wrong, but I believe the article, the scientific research is like only like 15% of the population can actually think in 3D, or like visualize in 3D.
Right.
So I would say most people in construction probably have that ability,
yes.
right? Yeah. But most people look at it 2D. And the challenge is now these projects are so complex, right? You've got pergolas, pools, all of it, right? And there's multiple textures and colors. even for a designer, like you don't always know what it's going to look like until you see it. And
Right.
you know, as I'm going through designs, even if like for my own house, I'll look at something like, God, it looks terrible. I should put this in here. But you wouldn't know otherwise
Yeah.
until you're actually laying it.
Yeah.
And that's when all of the problems pop up, right? It's like,
Yeah.
that color looks terrible. I want to
Yes.
switch it. Like, well, I just waited 6 weeks for this.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
you know, whatever it is. So.
Well, and the good example is like I framed houses for a while, so that's where I learned carpentry. So this was back in the early 2000s, and my wife and I built a house about 5 years ago, and we used a smaller builder that didn't do like 3D, like all that stuff. And she's like, I can't even, like, we're looking at the plans. She goes, I can't. I'm like, I'm walking through the house. Like I'm like, this is here and this is, like I'm already there, because I can visualize it. And that happens with my designs. And so it's definitely a thing. And you start realizing that there's people that, and sometimes it can be as easy as just like, maybe you don't have to do the whole patio that way, but a certain, like you want to see the kitchen or the fireplace or or a structure and how that's going to look in the space. So it is a very powerful tool, and it's really cool to see that evolve and become more and more realistic. So well done with that. So one of the things I wanted to talk about too is, like, you mentioned all the different companies and growing through acquisition, and Old Castle is a large ship, right?
Yeah.
And I have a little bit different relationship with Belgard, and more knowledge and more behind the scenes because of some career paths that I've had over the years, right? But in 2010, I made a pretty good switch from like Pavestone to Belgard, and based on that relationship that started with my rep, and the fact that I was getting frustrated with, I think at that time, and this is no knock on other companies, but at that time, Pavestone had not like renewed their catalog for maybe 3 years, and we're still, I'm like, here's the same stuff, and like, so I was seeing this new product come through, and I think that's about when Belgard was kind of starting to hit Kansas City, and nice catalog, very well done. I think the chipper's still doing all the picture. I mean, he does a phenomenal job. He's taking pictures of a few of our jobs, and it was just like a relief to show something new that had been around a while, obviously. But and then I have a rep that's built a relationship, and we're friends. We hunt together and do things, go play golf together, and like,
that's awesome.
So it's something where you kind of build that, and you start. It's kind of, you buy from people, right? Mm-hmm. And then through my process of working with SiteOne and Mirage, and just even now being able to come and speak at events, and the trust and the relationship I built with Belgard as a whole, that's a large part of why I use Belgard a lot. And awesome. Where I'm going with this is, through social media and some other things, I get quite a bit of grief for using only Belgard, right? Because there are other brands out there.
Sure, yeah.
And I try to explain what I just explained. But I understand that Belgard is not the favorite in a lot of places. And I know that you guys are on a mission to bring that, make a better name for yourself everywhere. And some of that can be done through acquisition, or some of that can be done through approaching the market differently and trying to get more market share. So I guess where I'm going with this is, from a large company that has reps everywhere, mm-hmm. where are you guys at with that? Yeah, I mean, kind of perspective. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
No, that makes complete sense. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, so we are a large company. A lot of people, I think, don't quite understand, the structure, and quite honestly, it can be confusing, right? So Belgard is actually a brand underneath a company called CRH, which is a publicly traded company based out of Ireland.
Right.
The North American division, Old Castle, there are several divisions under Old Castle. Old Castle APG, Architectural Products Group, is the company that Belgard is under.
Right.
So, but when you look at Old Castle, we actually have a large family of brands now in the outdoor living space. Right. And we just recently acquired, for example, Brett Outdoor Living. Brett makes fencing, rail systems, decking, screen panels. They're quite a large company in its own right. So we've got Brett. We also have Moisture Shield, which is a composite deck company. It's based out of Arkansas. We've got TechnoSeal, and last year we acquired PebbleTech. So if you look at what we're acquiring, in addition to companies like EP Henry, of course, Calstone, we recently acquired both of them. we're expanding in that kind of the hardscape space, but also beyond that, and looking at this like as a whole ecosystem essentially. Because what we know is, going back to that conversation of even my company back in the late 90s is, we struck a nerve and we realized, and this is still the case today, that people want these beautiful, complex outdoor spaces that are really exterior homes or extension without it's a home without a roof, really. I mean, everything you do in the house is happening out there, right? You need the same skills, plumbing, electrical, all of it. But it can be a daunting task, right? So you've got, we've got over 2,000 authorized contractors. Most of them are specialists in hardscape because that's what, has been promoted. That's where they started. But our hope is that we can help them evolve into more of a design build outdoor living contractor. And the reason is that's what consumers want. And it's not an easy task, right? Because it's extremely complex, as you know. I mean, pool, it's not like, I can take a couple of classes and I'm doing this stuff, right? So, but what we can do is help try to consolidate and at least start to design products that are designed to work together and, from a color perspective, functionality perspective, but then also pull those together from a distribution perspective, from a design perspective. And so you're right. I mean, we do have it depends on the market. Some markets were number one, some markets were not. Right? It's just I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And we don't like that. Obviously, we all just like everybody, you want to be number one, you want to win.
Right.
And we know we have some challenges, but we are taking. Part of the replatforming is step one of like how do we start to standardize? How do we start to be more innovative? And I would say over the last couple of years, especially, that our innovation with a lot of things is really second to none. We still have a long way to go, and we need to make that more widespread.
Right.
But if you're at H&A the last couple of years, you can see examples of that. And again, H&A is a good example of some of the challenges we have. Like what was shown there is really not available anywhere collectively.
Yeah.
We pull from all of our companies to achieve that. But over the next coming years, we're going to make that standard, and as much as possible. So we have some work to do, but we're super excited. I mean, if you look at the level of investment, we have 17 new facilities, big board facilities being built in North America, or coming to fruition within the next probably year, maybe 18 months. So we are heavily investing in this space, and obviously through acquisition, you can see that too. And the reason is if you look at our overall, even worldwide, opportunities. We believe outdoor living is by far and away the best opportunity. I mean, it's just, but the challenge is, I think for all of us, is how do we deliver a better overall experience and product to the consumer more efficiently, more cost effectively.
Right.
And the only way we do that is if we collectively are working on this solution. And, we'll do whatever we can on our end, but we are investing in training. We are looking at look, if you guys don't make money, we don't make money.
Right.
You don't grow, we don't grow.
Right.
So I guess our perspective is a little maybe broader than some of our competitors, which is, I think it's good. I mean, it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But the opportunity we think is there. So
right, and
exciting.
I've talked to my rep and just sitting around and chatting. Sometimes it's like I kind of feel in some ways that Belgard is behind in some things, but ahead in other ways. Like what you just explained, you're kind of ahead of everybody with, and I'm a general contractor base. I have a general contracting license, and we go in and we say, here's the design. We're going to hand you the keys to your backyard when you're done. And the relief that we get from homeowners that we don't have to call, because they've talked to a pool company, they've talked to a landscaper, a hardscaper. We need a fence. Who does the electrical? I had one. I actually was the one we did the 3D design for. He said the pool company told me I had to hire the electrician and had to haul all the dirt off. I was like, how from the excavation of the pool? Like, how are they going to know how to do this? Like, who are they going to call? Like, and it's just as easy as like somebody was going to build their own turf field or something like for soccer, and they're like, we called this landscape supply. They said they could bring 6 tons of gravel at a time. I'm like, no, you need to call a quarry. Like, people just don't understand what they need, what needs to be done. So a lot of the questions I get by the time I get there is, so we don't have to call anybody. You're going to take care of all that, and they're willing to invest. And I'm trying to treat it like a builder would, where I bring a few subs in. I have an electrician, a plumber, fencing companies, irrigation, whatever. and they're eating it up. They love it.
Well, I mean, nobody has time, especially the clients that we typically would deal with. They don't have time to manage that, right? And to your point, they don't even know how to do it, who to call.
Right.
And you can get a premium for that for sure. I mean, just like a general would building a house. I mean, you're going to tack on whatever, 20%, 30, whatever you want, really, in some cases. And so, like for us, that is the biggest challenge, right? Is how do we foster that? How do we help contractors evolve to that? And because that's where people are at, you know. So.
Right. And I guess where I was going earlier with there's a lot of development being done there's R&Ds in Canada. Is that correct?
It is
for the
in
most
Montreal,
part?
yeah.
So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and even new stuff and new ways to be efficient and new products and that.
Sure.
And so I'm sure it takes longer to get those things from R&D to the dealer or to the contractor. Just because is that due to the size, or is it due to testing, or how?
No,
can you
it
explain
is.
a
I
little
mean,
bit about
historically, it could take as much, even on average, 30 months, which is a long time. I mean, for making a paver wall. But so by replatforming to modularity, we are able to do that even in less than a year.
Right.
But when you look at those, so to your point earlier about these projects, the consumer looks at that project as really the product, right? So when you look at, it's like building a house, right?
Right.
As a consumer, you're interested in the house design, the elevation, the layout, right? The carpet and all the components that make up the house are like secondary on your list. And, obviously carpet's important, same with tile, whatever. Right. But they're buying the house, and so we recognize that, right? I mean, the pavers and walls are a component of that outdoor living space, but they also have plants. They have structures. They have natural stone. All of it, right? So when we are thinking through how do we help the contractors with design, we acknowledge that all these pieces are in there. So you really have to step back and put our own selfish interest aside for a second and say, what's the best thing for this consumer? Because ultimately people buy on trust. And and as a contractor or a dealer, whoever, if you're legitimately trying to help them achieve the best space for them, that's where you win, I think, right? Because if you're going to come in there and your goal is to sell thousands of square feet of pavers and you're going to disregard everything else, that's not really authentic experience, right?
Because you're a pavement company, basically.
Yeah, you're selling pavement, which is great. I mean, we'd love that to happen, but we also realize they're going to have a pergola, they're going to have whatever else, and so we may be able to sell that, or we may not be able to. And if we're not able to, then we'll find partners, to supply some of that, just like we've done with Mirage and some of the, TrueScapes, for instance. So
it's becoming easier to find everything you need, through the dealers. Right. And man, you said something, and I was going to go off from there, but I lost my train of thought on that one. But it's been really. It's been really interesting to see the evolution of the product and the brands and the expansion of products through acquisition and things. So, what are just some challenges you face, that you're seeing in the industry? Like, is there certain challenges that you think that you as a manufacturer can help overcome, or is it? I mean, we're seeing a lot of tool companies. We're seeing heavy, labor's one of them. Are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, labor, I think forever maybe will be an issue, right? I mean, we make heavy product, but the cool thing is we've aligned with some of the companies like Optimus and Pave Tool to start thinking through can we design our products better to better integrate with these tools. But I think beyond that, you look at the future, we've, as I mentioned, are investing heavily, and, obviously we're going to have a lot of capacity soon, probably. But we know there's a demand there, but how do we get people there? And more importantly, how do we recruit the next generation? For better or worse, a lot of the younger people don't want to, lug a 100-pound block around. I don't know why. I mean, it's amazing, but it's not. I think historically, you could put, maybe by the time you're 45, you're like, okay, I got to check out. My back's messed up. I can't do this. My knees are shot. The cool part is we know we have the tools in the industry to not have to do that, right? And so I think for us, it's our responsibility and a necessity to really promote what is the ideal way to do this and set it up. I get that you can lift, X amount, and that's, there's some, ego there. It's all good, but you can't do that consistently every day. And more importantly, is that attractive to the next generation? I would say no, probably not.
No. Yeah.
And so if we collectively can show them, hey, we're not in the Stone Age. I mean, we are utilizing the latest tools and technologies to sell it, to install it, all of it, to design it. And you don't have to break your back. You know, you can utilize these tools and work till you're 65 years old if you're smart about it. But if you're not willing to invest in tools and you're not willing to kind of learn these new techniques, then yeah, maybe you can only do it till you're 45,
right,
or even younger.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's, you know, as you think through all these things, like once these tools and products are in place, that's really the next frontier. Is like, how do we tap in and really promote the latest techniques?
Right, and let's make pavers bigger and crews smaller.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you have all the right equipment, I mean, you can get down to 2 people and pay them well, and everyone's happy, and the homeowners are happy, and
yes, and we're running lean, and we're using vacuums and excavator, and we're using. And what's interesting is when you start buying equipment and tools, you're like, oh, let's try using that tool for this. Like it's kind of like when you rent something. You're like, okay, let's save up everything we're going to do with that machine for one day, right? And this is where I kind of have to think as a business owner and purchasing equipment, because they're large purchases, is how can we use this machine other than just for what it's for, right? So if we're buying an excavator, most people think of those as digging machines. Like that's all they do. We use ours we have a tilt rotator where the bucket spins and, you know, all that. We use it to put rock in our landscape beds. We use it to dig our plants out. We use it if we have big trees, sometimes we'll dig those. We'll, drainage. We're hanging our vacuum off of it. We're hanging our wall clamps. We're setting granite. We're, anything. So it's that machine shows up when we're getting ready to excavate, and it doesn't leave until we're done.
Sure.
And so we're able to use that. And the amount of money that it would cost to rent that over 2 months or whatever that we're on a project would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm weighing that. And you brought up a good point with like Pave Tool. Since we're at the show, I was talking to Phil, and actually I was with Don Armstrong, one of the engineers from Oldcastle, and we were talking with Phil about tools and how, and because Don's really in the commercial mostly.
He is. Yep.
So looking at, he's saying guys are still, they're just hand laying walls because they can find the manpower and it's faster than some of the clamps and things. But I think where the tools are really coming in is the residential space and, tight access areas where you're not, you can't just pull a pallet right up to the wall and here we go. So it's interesting how different parts of the industry are accepting, technology and tools and things like that as well.
Well, and it's funny, you do those analysis, right? Like you can lift 3 or 4 retaining wall block with some of those clamps, right? And it's maybe not quite as fast as the guy slinging it, but how long can that guy sling it?
Right.
Maybe an hour or 2 and he's dead. Right. So the excavator doesn't get tired.
Well, and we were doing slabs that were 100. I figured it out off the pallet weight. They were 115 pounds a piece.
Yeah.
70 millimeter, and it was like, and it seemed like we were going slow using the excavator and the vacuum. And I have a boom that goes out 15 feet as well. So we're reaching and we're getting it. So we went through a day and laid 5, 6 pallets, 7 pallets.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we lifted one of them.
Yeah.
And get to the end of the day and you're like, okay, but then to our point earlier, when we have to start cutting those in half, I'm basically sliding them off the pallet, cutting them, and then we're carrying half the piece and putting it in. And the cutting process was worse than laying it because we weren't able to use all the vacuums. Some
are so big you really even can't lay it because you can't get your finger in there or you'll smash your finger. Yeah.
But so we've found that having tools and equipment it's very important. And I'm, just like you, have been in the industry a long time. My knees hurt, my back hurt. And if I get a new injury, it takes way longer to get better.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. Once you start using that, you realize like, man, why didn't I do this sooner? And then your guys were like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to hand carry, which I don't blame them. I mean, there's really no excuse. The tools they're not really that expensive, especially the specialty tools, if you really kind of amortize them out. And some of those hand tools will last a decade. I mean, you're not buying them every year. So.
Yep. And I have people that say, do you really think that's faster? And kind of to your point earlier, I say, yeah, it's more efficient.
Yeah.
And that's the word I use because more
consistent.
More consistent, yes. So are we laying the same amount of square feet we could? Probably. Would we want to do it again tomorrow? No. But we have another 1,000 square feet to lay tomorrow. Yeah. So, and we're able to do that, So it's something that I think is very important, and it offers a lot more safety as well.
Sure.
So, well, I've taken some of your time, and I appreciate you. I know you're a very busy man, and we're at a trade show here, and I really appreciate you taking the time. But, and I probably didn't cover everything I wanted to, but we were talking about, design and building and materials, and I found that what's interesting is design is important, but as contractors, really we're selling what we do, right? And I've noticed this as I'm building my portfolio. And I'm very passionate about the industry as you are, and the quality that goes into it, not only from the product side but from the installation side. I don't consider us a production company. We're an outdoor living company that focuses on details and doing the work correctly, and a space that will last. And so it's been interesting for me to see when I do a design meeting now, they're almost like, yeah, okay. And what I'm really there for is the end product, and it's interesting as we're talking about. And I think the design and the 3D design and stuff it's actually going to probably be more important as the economy maybe slows a little, and people are having to really start selling again. People are saying yes to about everything right now over the last couple of years, right?
Sure.
So, but I think with quality products, quality installation, and good partnerships, I think the industry has, like you said, the sky's the limit for where we can go. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think I agree with you too. I think the companies that are doing quality design build work are the ones who will weather any downturn better. Or I mean, just because that's what people want. And there's a severe shortage of those types of companies out there. So
any final thoughts, or do you want to share where people can find? I mean, I know there's a huge website for the whole country.
Yeah, you can go on to Belgard.com. It's probably the best place to go. But or follow us on Instagram or Facebook or other social media sites. But yeah, I mean, I guess in my mind, just kind of closing with, I think and I talk about this a lot, kind of the drivers behind what's happening, and we do a ton of research, and I think what COVID has done for our industry has allowed people to kind of reconnect with the need to be outside, and this idea that these spaces are a necessity for your everyday health and well-being, right? I mean, we look at it as a luxury product, but in reality, especially in today's world, I mean, you look at like depression, anxiety, there's lots of issues going on with people. And a lot of it stems from lockdown and COVID, but I think also just there's this increasing disconnection from each other when we're all on screens, and so these spaces we build really bring people together. They bring them back into nature, and science is showing us that it can reduce your stress 30 or 40% within like 15 minutes, just sitting outside, right? And so I think we sometimes lose sight of that, or maybe don't even think about that when we're contracting. It's more about the entertainment side, which is also very valuable. But, designing a space that really can change someone's life. Like somebody said years ago, like, hey, we're not saving lives here, building lives. It actually, in some cases, you might be, right? Just in terms of, I mean, I experienced this back in the day, and I'm sure you do. People are just overwhelmed by, especially come like a year later, like, oh my gosh, this space has transformed my life. I'm out there with my kids, my neighbors, my family. We're out there every day. We were talking more like that. That's what people really are buying. The space itself is the vehicle to get that. Right. So I think I would say, just as a contractor and designer, like, don't lose sight of that and try to tap into that, because you will end up building a better, more suited space for that client. It's not about trying to take advantage of them or but just having them think about, like, how am I going to use this space? How will it impact my life every day? Those kind of questions really can affect the design greatly.
Right.
So I guess I would just close with that as a
Yeah,
thought.
I think that's fantastic. And we just finished one recently where every time I talk to them, they're like, we just can't believe this. We're every day. And what's really interesting, we're in the Midwest, right? So you're not going to use your pool all year. Their pool's closed right now, right?
Yeah.
But they have a fire pit. They got, a place to watch TV. They have a place to eat. They got their grill out there. And it's like, year round, there's something you can be doing. And, he loves to do fire pits. We use one of the new smokeless Belgard fire pits. And, man, he just loves it. And getting out there, and he's like, we're out there literally every day. We spend the weekends out there, just like you were saying. And it's really interesting, because then the rooms come into, play where you're like, you need this kind of space and this kind of space all in one area.
Sure.
If you can manage it, right? So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, we like to say, I mean, one of the things we've been talking about is like our job as an industry it should be, how do we get people outside and how do we get them to fall in love with nature again?
Right.
You know, I mean, because that's essentially, I mean, you're in nature, right? When
Right.
you're in these spaces. And I think if that's the foundational, goal, I think the sky's the limit for all of us. So.
Yes, that's awesome. And I'll say that, as somebody that's been a contractor, a dealer, a vendor, and had a long relationship with Belgard, I think it's easy to, as somebody that doesn't have that view, from the outside looking in, I guess you could say, Belgard's only as good as their feet on the ground, or their dealer that's selling it, or the contractor that, bad news travels fast,
Sure.
so it's easy for some to be short-sighted, but for me, as I mentioned earlier, having that inside view and people like you and like talking with Don and Paul Curitan and
Sure.
Mike Hodges and Sam Schmidt's now moved from our area into a national role, and there's just some really good people that are very passionate about the industry and the Belgard line, and so I appreciate working with you guys.
I appreciate it as well. I mean, we're a big company, but we're still human. We're not perfect, right. And and we're making plans to always be better. So.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the time, and hope everything.
Yeah.
Hopefully, 2023 is a great year for all of us, and
I think it will be. I think there's still, despite some bumps in the road, I think we should be able to weather this no problems.
Yep.
All right. Should be good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Appreciate it, Craig.
Yep.
Thank you.